Hello, everybody, and welcome to TDWI's webinar program. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Linda Briggs. I'm an editor here at TDWI, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. Our program today is 6 strategies for modernizing data visualization with dashboards and reports. It's sponsored by Wine Enterprise by Grape City. And for our presentations today, we'll first hear from David Stoddard with TDWI. Then we have a presentation by Ethan Connor with Grape City. Before I turn the stage over to Dave to get us started, let me go over a few background items with the audience. First of all, our webinar today will be an hour long. At the end of the presentations, the speakers will entertain a question and answer period with the audience. So if at any time during either presentation you have a question for a speaker, just type it in there on your console, send it over. We'll get to as many of those as we can toward the end of the hour. If you run into any technical issues, there is a help area below the slide window. I want to draw your attention to that if you need technical assistance. If you're a Twitter user and you'd like to discuss this webinar on Twitter with fellow attendees, we certainly welcome that. Please include the hashtag TDWI. Finally, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, you can download a PDF immediately. There's a line for that on your console. In addition, as always, we're recording the webinar and we'll be emailing each of you a link to the archive later today so you can view the presentation again later if you choose, or please feel free to share that link with colleagues who might not have been able to make it today. Okay, once again, our program is 6 strategies for modernizing data visualization with dashboards and reports. Our first speaker today is David Stoddard. Dave is Senior Director of Research for Business Intelligence here at TDWI. As an analyst, writer, and researcher, Dave has provided thought leadership on key topics in BI, analytics, IT, and information management for over 2 decades. Previously, he headed up his own independent firm and served as VP and Research Director with Ventana Research. Dave was the founding chief editor of Intelligent Enterprise, a major publication and media site dedicated to the BI and data warehousing communities. He served as editorial director there for 9 years. With TDWI Research, Dave focuses on providing research-based insights and best practices for organizations implementing BI, analytics, performance management, and related technologies and methods. So Dave, let me turn the stage over to you here.
Great. Thank you very much, Linda, and welcome to everyone who's joining us today. And of course, we at TDWI wish you good health and safety. Concerned about our whole community these days in these strange times. Okay, we've got a good webinar today, and thanks again to Wine Enterprise by Grape City for sponsoring it, and we'll be hearing from Ethan later, as Linda mentioned. Just to get an agenda out there. So I'm going to open up with just some thoughts about sort of the context around trends and some challenges in modernizing data visualization with dashboards and reports, and then spend most of my time on 6 strategies and recommendations. Then we, as Linda mentioned, we will have an audience poll question, so we'll get some feedback from our audience just ahead of the audience Q&A that we'll have later, and then we'll hear from Ethan at Wine Enterprise. Okay, well, let's see. The quest for better user experiences, I think that's really kind of what's behind modernizing data visualization with dashboards and reports. It is really a lot about how can we give users the tools they need, the data they need to have a better experience as they're trying to work their way through a business question, understand how to improve business outcomes and things like that. And so always trying to think of, what is the purpose of this in the background, not just, the technology and kind of having fun with tools. And so data visualization with dashboards, there's a lot of different ways to say it, but one way to say it is to reduce the friction between data and human insight. And so that's one of the great things that visualization has done, is it's taken out a lot of those kind of steps of trying to figure out what is it, what are we looking at here? Well, now we're using technology to make it easier to see what we're looking at here and to really kind of fire off that human insight to understand what's going on and what to do about it. Now, it's an ongoing revolution in kind of data interaction. I think, it's one of the most exciting things, certainly for me to be observing, and I think for all of us, is to how visualization is improving, how it's sort of fitting with the form factors out there, whether it be mobile devices, large screen displays, and so forth, to improve data interaction. And of course, there's lots of new types of data as well. So from enterprise BI to self-service, this is the democratizing kind of revolution that's been going on really for some time now. Even trace it back quite a ways as users trying to take more control and more ownership of their data and just their experience with interacting with the data. And so self-service is really important. In a way, in our webinar, we'll be talking about how to balance things around enterprise BI and self-service. So that's an important issue. To look at where organizations are, this is our research from actually late 2019. So 63% of organizations surveyed say users rely on centralized BI analytics. So that would be the kind of enterprise BI, enterprise reporting that will be set up by IT. 54% on departmentally managed. So that would be more the self-service and at least leading towards self-service. In other words, where the business units, departments taking more control over their experience with business intelligence and data discovery and data visualization. And then 49% on embedded capabilities in business applications. So that's a pretty big percentage right there. So not to be forgotten there is that a lot of users out there experience analytics and dashboards and things like that through embedded capabilities in their business applications. It could be a point application, some sort of corporate application, that kind of thing. So I think what we're seeing here is that trying to get towards better user experiences and also trying to work with this revolution and democratization so that users have more control. The dashboards and reports, they're definitely part of this evolution I'm talking about, where we're seeing advances all the time. I mean, if we think back to what dashboards used to be like when they were first introduced, it's amazing how far they've come, and particularly a lot around visualization. So dashboards, what they can do, bringing together multiple types of visualizations. Of course, early dashboards really just gave you one or maybe two visualizations. Now there's lots of choices that can be made there in terms of how you want to look at the data in a single presentation interface. One of the key drivers around dashboards, and maybe the original driver, was trying to put together key performance indicators, maybe other kinds of metrics as well, how to communicate what the organization is looking for, say from a particular business department, or maybe for a sales campaign or something like that, something very specific. What are the thresholds? What objectives are we trying to reach? And then using dashboards to communicate that. And of course, visualization has really revolutionized that as well. So it used to be, dashboards were fairly crude, but then we've got this sort of, whole revolution in dials and widgets and all kinds of things that can, gamification, even things that can happen in a dashboard. Here, the photograph is interesting because it's a large display. And I think, that when we think about mobile, we think about desktop, but also we should be thinking about large displays because, of course, that has revolutionized as well, the pixel quality and everything, and what can be displayed on these dashboards, the large displays is incredible. More users, more data, diverse information. I mean, I think we're all seeing that as well, that, again, a lot of dashboards started out with very tailored, specific information, and it expanded to things that were maybe contextually relevant to it, different ways of looking at data, maybe different, depending on maybe looking at a supply chain, may have lots of different ingredients to that, so different suppliers, different stages, so you might want to see how these are related to each other. How can we put those together in a dashboard? More data. So again, a lot of early dashboards were just the samples of data, maybe an extract that would work for a particular interest. Well, now there's more data. I mean, there's more data. There's always going to be more data as more data is being created every day, and so organizations want to tap into that data. And then it's diverse data, so not just structured relational data, but data that's coming from external to the organization that we don't know the format of, or maybe we don't know how it's defined and things like that. So we'll talk about that a bit as we go on, how important that is. So the goal, I think, still is really this idea of immersive speed of thought experiences. I mean, that sounds like a little bit of a buzzword kind of concept, but it's important that immersive, meaning that can we give everybody all the information they need in one place, or get close to that, so they don't have to keep moving from different tools and different applications, and so that they're getting to that idea that as they think of things, as the speed of thought, as they need to make a decision, they have everything in front of them, or at least can access it to do that. And so AI is starting to be an important part of that, as we're starting to see. You see here 26% are already using AI to provide user recommendations I mean, that's a little bit of a different topic thought than immersive speed of thought, but it's related certainly because if AI can provide user recommendations, that means users don't have to go further distances, less friction. Again, to use that earlier idea, to get to the information they need to make a decision. AI is starting to help them see what the alternatives are, see what data sets they need to look at, and things like that. And so automated discovery and delivery of insights also, that's really the chief one that organizations are looking for in terms of using AI. Again, sort of reducing the number of steps, making it all go faster so they can get to that kind of speed of thought concept. But some of the modernization challenges, again, broadly, I'll talk about some of these more specifically as we go forward, but skills and training still lag behind. We see in our research that we look at barriers to more expansion in the use of BI and reporting and analytics and so forth. Skills and training is always in the top 2 or 3. So, and this is exacerbated to some degree by democratization because now you've got a lot more users, and it's not clear at times who needs skills training and who doesn't. There used to be sort of the data savvy power users that maybe needed less training, but now if we're talking about truly non-technical business users, they're going to need more training. And so there has to be this constant attention to that in organizations to make sure that users understand. Now, there's been progress toward ease of use. Of course, that's a big part of what's been going on in terms of visualization is greater ease of use. So there has to be a meeting point there, of course, between the skills that people need and then what the tool can do to provide ease of use. And then another concept that we're starting to see here is data literacy. So organizations are really thinking about, well, beyond just the tool use, do our users really understand what the data is telling them? Can they work with the data? Can they share it? Are they communicating what the data insights are, effectively and telling the right story? And so organizations are starting to think about that now, how they can do that. So I think these are 2 things, really, how to improve user productivity and satisfaction, and that's really the kind of meeting point to have the skills match up well with the ease of use the tools are providing, and then improving data literacy in organizations, really kind of getting beyond just the tool, but understanding the data, understanding statistical reasoning, understanding what the AI is presenting to them, so not just taking it at face value. The other modernization challenge is too many interfaces. I mentioned before trying to get to the immersive and speed of thought, but to some degree we're still at a point where, and we see in our research, that users have too many dashboards, too many interfaces. They have to go from one to the other to try to understand things, and sometimes there's conflicts between them. They may be, dashboards tied to a specific application or a specific process, that kind of thing. And so that is something that enterprise consolidation and centralization can be helpful for. I mean, we've been kind of in a movement away from that towards self-service, but this is the area where the enterprise view can be very helpful. And then data trust, governance, and security. In a highly distributed data world, I mean, governance already was a challenge, but now it's even more challenging because we don't have IT controlling what everybody's doing with the data. And so how do we get to that governance point without, upsetting users by taking away some of their self-service capabilities? So this is something that organizations are really trying to work their way through. And, of course, there's the pressures of data privacy and data security governance and regulatory adherence that has to be dealt with. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little more specifically about some of the 6 strategies and some of these kind of amplified things that I've said in the first few slides. Okay, so first is thinking about that kind of visualization, immersive, how do we get to make it easier to gain actionable insights? Now, the starting point for a lot of self-service was frustration with traditional reporting, that it was too one-size-fits-all. In other words, it didn't give users a lot of options, or if it gave them some, it wasn't really relevant to what they're trying to do, so they could maybe filter some things or maybe choose a few visualizations, but it didn't really get to the flexibility they really needed to get the data to solve what they're doing. And so self-service has been very important in that. So the other problem with traditional reporting, swamping users with too many data points. So sometimes the reports get voluminous, so big that, they went from sort of the giant paper stack to being cluttered dashboards like I have here. These are actually supposed to be examples of cluttered dashboards. So too many data points, nobody can really quite figure out what is relevant. And so in a way, it's just sort of bringing back the giant, 5-inch stack of paper on the desk, and now it's just a digital form of that. So that was a complaint with, I think, too much enterprise reporting, is that it was more than anybody could really deal with, and more than was really relevant for what someone was trying to do. Static dashboards with too much information. In other words, it was presenting things. There wasn't a lot of filtering that you could do in terms of seeing what you really wanted to see and not what you don't want to see, and too static in terms of it wasn't being updated properly. It wasn't interactive enough so that users could begin to dive down and drill in and look at things. Now, we've come a long way from there. I'm sure those in our audience who are working with enterprise BI systems would say, well, we've come a long way from that. There's a lot more drill down. There's a lot more selection that can happen. And I think that's absolutely true. So that's an advance we've seen in enterprise systems. Then not only voluminous reports, but too many. As I mentioned before, too many dashboards, too many interfaces. And then self-service is kind of added to that, because if you have a lot of enterprise reports and enterprise dashboards, and now we're adding self-service to it, so that just increases the numbers. So it starts to add to the time and expense issues. Now here I have, considering time and expense of report development is key to realize value, because organizations are trying to do an awful lot with, excuse me, my cell phone just suddenly started to go off. Okay, trying to do too much. There's a lot of development happening, and it's key to realize value from all that development. So obviously organizations are spending a lot of time trying to get good data to users, and now they need to see the value. So two things that are frustrating is that, too much data at the same time, too many reports at the same time, hard to filter through it all. Enabling quicker insight and collaboration. So that's what we're trying to get to solve these problems. So visualization is very important to helping solve these problems. So adding more capabilities, adding better interaction, allowing users to make more choices, these are the kind of things that can help them get to the data they need, and also get to be able to visualize it and get to actionable information faster. So visualization, as I mentioned, is an ongoing revolution, building on advances in understanding human perception. How do we see patterns? How do we see structures in data? How do we spot outliers, anomalies, and things like that? And so dashboards and interfaces should aim for clarity to help to work with those ideas of human perception to improve clarity, not to add more clutter, but to make it faster and easier for people to see what they're trying to look at. So dashboard designers need to be thinking about use of shapes, use of color and movement, understand what kind of colors excite certain kinds of thoughts, emotions in people, and make sure you're using the right colors for the right purpose. If it's going to be a large screen display, what kind of things do people need to be able to spot quickly if they're in a room or in a control room or something like that, trying to see something on a screen, starting to see data relationships. Have to think about what these kind of items of visualization can do for improving actionability of the information. And then using different mediums for purposes. So with mobile, we've certainly seen a lot done with dashboards to improve it for the form factor. I mean, you have only so much real estate in a mobile device, and only you have to think about what a user would be doing when they're on the go to design it properly, so that they can be obviously pretty simple, easy to collaborate with, as it might be using it joined with other things like maybe texting or Slack or something like that, so that they can pass information quickly. Same is true when you think, as I mentioned before, about large screen displays or even desktop. Think about what is the form factor, what are people likely to be doing when they're engaging in that interface. And so these are the kind of things that are important to reducing time to insight, and again, allowing organizations to gain better value from all the effort they're doing to put into enterprise reporting and self-service reporting. Okay, so number 2 is that issue of balancing self-service with enterprise. And so here we can look at a little bit of our research here, and thinking about democratization, self-service being really hand in hand with the idea of spreading data capabilities out to more users. We looked in our research at different kinds of personas, so being basically different classifications of users and whether they're satisfied and how satisfied they are. And so we can see here there's room for improvement. I mean, business and data analysts who are some of the most experienced at using BI systems, if you combine the very satisfied and somewhat satisfied, it's pretty good. It's 66%, so about two-thirds. But then looking at, only 11% are very satisfied, so there's room for improvement. Then we look at other kinds of users in organizations. Business users are kind of around the same, a little bit less. Internal application developers, data engineers, and so it goes on down. And some of the new kinds of users that organizations are having to be thinking about, consumers and customers, as organizations, again, try to maybe monetize data or monetize analytics to create dashboards for external users out there, external customers, business partners. So satisfaction needs to be raised there. So anyway, these are some of the different kinds of users out there, and have to think again about what's the context of what they're trying to do, what kind of visualizations would be most important to them. So looking at some other things, self-service is still a very high priority. I don't think we're going to see any change in that as users want to have more ownership and more empowerment about what they're doing with data. Self-service, users lack standardization, inconsistent data quality. We see this in our research as well, that some of the issues of why they may not be satisfied tend to be around that. There's not standardization of data definitions or what they're looking at. There's inconsistent data quality. They can't get to that single view of the data very easily, so through their tools wanting to bring in other sources of data around the organization, like, for example, to understand customer buying patterns. They want to look at different kinds of data. It's difficult to get that data and get it into one interface. So those are some of the issues that organizations need to be dealing with to improve self-service. And what this, I think, does point to is a better balance needed between self-service and enterprise, because enterprise can help solve some of these problems. And so a modernized enterprise can approach this with the idea of trying to get to that balance. So away from the old days of the one-size-fits-all to a better integration between self-service and enterprise. So enterprise can take on some of the things that are difficult to do from a departmental level. That would be solving common quality, security, and governance issues. Improving data quality, making sure that the right users, are authenticated users, have the right access rights, can access the data. And then governance, looking after, again, those issues as well as data privacy and other regulatory issues. We'll talk about governance more in a minute. But those are some of the issues that certainly enterprise level can do. Enterprise is critical to that expansion to embedded reports and dashboards to make sure that the users of those systems who are getting more data savvy and expecting more out of the reporting and analytics and dashboards that they have access to. I'm thinking again, about all those new kinds of users that organizations have, the new personas. So at an enterprise level, it can be easier to deal with lots of different kinds of embedded reports and dashboards and deal with the common data quality issues, set up things for reuse and pre-definition, which can improve efficiency and performance. So they're understanding some of the patterns, the user patterns, what users are going to be doing with the data, and being able to set that up ahead of time. This is a common procedure that's important for improving performance. And this can also improve quality as well as organizations begin to sort of look at what data is needed and can tinker with it and bring in the right combinations of data. So these are steps that can be done in sort of a modernized enterprise to improve self-service. Okay, let's go to number 3. And of course, one of the most important things in improving self-service is improving the knowledge about the data and making use of that effective. So this is about metadata. It's about data about the data. Of course, it expands beyond that to really understand things like data lineage, where the data came from, who's been using it, where the data is actually located, why it's located where it is, moving out differences in definitions. These are the kind of things that are really important to building trust in data and dashboards and reports in the organization, because all that can be addressed before the users, get into a room and start arguing about who has the right data and who has the right data definitions. So it's important for organizations to be tending to this, and we do see in our research, as I note here, that twice as many that we've surveyed plan to centralize metadata management compared to 4 years ago, and that's going from, I think, 17% to is actually 36%, so slightly over twice as many. So that's an interesting trend, an important trend. And some of the things that are helping with that trend are being able to use AI effectively to build and manage these enterprise data catalogs, because that typically takes a lot of manual work. So the duties there, managing the metadata, resolving inconsistent data definitions, and the data can contain information about data lineage. So some of the things that are important, metadata management and data cataloging, it should be a cornerstone to how users meet these diverse data needs. So as they're expanding out to different types of data, being able to use metadata resources effectively to, as I mentioned, solve those data definition conflicts and other issues that's sort of conflicting about the data in the organization. And as I mentioned, AI, strong interest in using AI for data catalogs and enabling easier use of metadata. So they're using the AI to tackle the scale issues as we get to larger data sets and more diverse and complicated data sets. And then also being able to use automation to help maintain and build that catalog. So 79% in research want to see use to ease data access and discovery. So that's the first thing, is really just, can we use this metadata resource to make it easier to get to the data, get to that immersive, reduced time to insight kind of idea. 70% want to use metadata catalogs to more effectively in all of these areas that I've mentioned, and then 59% want to use metadata to coordinate data meaning across sources. So this is where, again, it's a more complex semantic meaning that is starting to build on top of just more simple data definition metadata. So that's another revolution that's occurring, is to build on that to understand data relationships at a higher level. Okay, number 4 is to reduce total cost of ownership. And so here, organizations are obviously always very interested in what they can do to reduce costs. And it's challenging to keep that under control as organizations expand. So, in many ways, expansion tends to increase costs, but organizations are looking at how they can reduce costs. And this is, again, where getting a good balance between enterprise and self-service can be very helpful, because then you can begin to reduce redundant things that users are doing and so forth. The budget limits are commonly one of the top barriers that we see in TWI research. As organizations kind of spread out and do more democratization and maybe moving into the cloud, some of the ingredients of what constitutes total cost of ownership are changing. So they have to think about not only just the computer hardware and programs that they are setting up, maybe the BI systems on or enterprise reporting systems on, but now to think about networking more, the cloud more, some of these areas and expense that in terms of moving data around and that kind of thing. So have to think about some of the new issues in total cost of ownership. And then note here the demand for data-driven applications and embedded dashboards and analytics can drive higher TCO. So again, that's another use case that we have to think about, how can we begin to use resources more efficiently, reduce redundancy and things like that. So some steps to lower it. One of the big ones is really another revolution we're seeing about towards web and cloud-based development. So it's long been the more native development on systems had more. It was more robust, had more features, could do more in terms of scaling and data. But that's really, the equation is changing there. So the web and cloud-based development BI systems, where users are accessing it over a browser from desktops, mobile devices, or large screen displays, to centralized databases and applications that could be on-site or in the cloud, getting much more feature functionality, better performance, and things like that. So this is a good development for reducing TCO, because it can obviously start to reduce some of the hardware and operational expenses that organizations are dealing with. Security and authorized controls of the centralized enterprise servers, this can be helpful in lowering TCOs, again, because it reduces redundancy, confusion, enable it to be centralized that way, so that not only are you reducing the TCO of setting it up, but also reducing the expenses that could come later when there are problems, and problems have to be dealt with. So this is important. And then using, for developers, industry open standards. Developers, if they're using these web-based and cloud-based paradigm, can work above kind of the more access issues, because those can be solved. Those can be set up ahead of time, so that they can begin to work much more on what do the users really need, what kind of information do they want to be looking at, all the kinds of issues that are important to making the development really in sync with what users want. So, yeah, some issues that are reducing TCO. Modernized performance management. As I mentioned before, dashboards are really been driven by the need for performance management for a long time, and it's still, we see in our research, it's one of the top things that organizations want to do with their dashboards. And so we can see here in the research kind of where it is in terms of satisfaction with how well they can perform certain activities with software tools or cloud-based services, so whether it might be web-based or cloud-based. And performance management, it's about in the middle there, so 12% are very satisfied, 36% somewhat satisfied. So again, room for, quite a bit of room for improvement there. And some of the other things that people do in tandem with looking at performance management metrics, sort of visual analysis. You might want to do ad hoc on-the-fly query and reporting, so that we can see there that 12% are very satisfied, 42% somewhat satisfied with this. Might want to do some data drill down, do more discovery around the data. Only 8% very satisfied with that, 42% somewhat satisfied. So again, these are things that organizations need to be working on to improve the use of performance management metrics, and then what users are going to be doing once they're looking at the metrics to try to understand performance and look at the data from different perspectives to see what could be done to improve performance. So again, this should be very high priority in organizations to drive improvement in dashboards and reports and rebalancing enterprise and self-service. So the enterprise role, is to improve that balance, help organizations integrate those KPIs and metrics. In a lot of cases, we see redundancy or confusion, particularly as organizations try to do more collaborative work and work together on different goals. One department may define things one way, metrics one way, and another way, not really seeing the relationship between the two. So at an enterprise level, this can be helpful, bringing people together, and then, of course, getting down to really supporting common models, common calculations, mapping to the data, hierarchies and dependencies. So again, not confused about how one part of the organization is organized in hierarchies versus another. So ironing out some of those differences, seeing the dependencies between different metrics and different sources of data, so that maybe an organization changes something underlying with the data management platform, it doesn't mess up metrics that someone else is using. So understanding those kind of dependencies, that can be seen better from an enterprise level. Support for drill down data exploration. Again, this is something that users have different needs for. Not everybody does the same thing. So this is where enterprise level needs to be able to provide that kind of flexibility to enable users to use visualizations effectively to make data interaction easier. Advanced analytics integration. We're starting to see more of this, where KPIs need to be supported by predictive insights. So predictive models, and reducing some of the distance between the development and data science of predictive insights and things coming from machine learning. How does that feed into our perception of business performance? How does that feed into the metrics that people are using to evaluate performance? So reducing some of the distance there. And so this is really a future trend, I think, is we're starting to see tighter integration between analytics and then beginning to use AI-based recommendations to support that role. And then number 6 is where a lot of kind of the rubber hits the road in many organizations in terms of using dashboards and visualizations is in operations. So organizations, as we see in our research, here we have what are the major business drivers behind investment in new technology. Operations is almost always at the top of the list, operational efficiency and effectiveness. They want to deploy dashboards, reports, data out to operational managers and even to frontline users to improve things. And then some of the other things that are relevant in this research, 50% want to use it to improve KPIs and metrics. About the same, reducing costs and improving profitability. And then 38% want to enable more automation of decisions and actions. So again, this is a future trend of what's occurring right now, but as we move forward, more automation of decisions in systems to try to take some of the more routine decision-making out of the hands of humans so that they can be focused on things where they really need to intervene. So improving operations of real-time insights is critical to get info for quick tactical decisions, which are very different from what maybe is the executives are trying to do with strategic decisions. So think about what they need right now to make a decision and need actionable insights. So the system needs to come together to use analytics effectively to provide those proactive insights in dashboards, recommendations based on predictive patterns, again, reducing some of the distance between the analytics being developed in the organization and the use of dashboards and KPIs. Make it actionable to use visualization effectively, to put that visualization in the context of the user's responsibilities, their skills, their knowledge, thinking about what the user is really going to be doing with the information. Moving toward real time, and for operations, usually any kind of delay that can be reduced is a good thing. So reducing data latency and increasing the visual clarity are both very important. And of course, in operations, often, particularly on frontline work, alerts and notifications are very important. So how do you pull all this information together use these as effective delivery points for things like real-time analytics, not bombard people with too many alerts, get them alert fatigue, which is an issue in many cases, but make sure they're seeing the things that are most important. And then take advantage of things like large screen displays. Not everybody needs to see things on their mobile devices or desktops. Maybe it'd be better for collaborative decisions or a group that's working as a team to look at large displays so they can all see together what's going on and what needs to be done about it. Okay, just to close, inspire people to innovate. And I think that's what a lot of this is about, is now allowing users to innovate in how their decisions are how they can make decisions and use data effectively. So grouping these together, use visualization effectively to improve actionable insights, get a better balance. Enterprise has a very good and very important role in self-service. Manage metadata to help users find data faster and allow the organization to govern data effectively. Reduce TCO, look for opportunities to reduce redundancy, improve reuse. Modernize performance management, since this is, as we see, one of the most important things organizations do to not let it get stale, to use analytics in particular to improve it, and then improve operational excellence by filtering the information properly and improving real-time insights. Okay, Linda, well, I think that's going to do it for me. But we do have a poll question we want to address to, I guess I'll go ahead and speak through this. So what is your biggest challenge in asking our audience in modernizing data visualization with dashboards and reports? So is it user adoption, just trying to get users to adopt the new technologies and use them effectively? Data security and governance, we often see that as a barrier, as I mentioned. Balancing self-service with enterprise systems, so trying to figure out what's the right relationship between the enterprise systems and self-service and getting the most out of both. Managing or trying to reduce total cost of ownership, so issues around not letting the cost, bending down the cost curve and finding effective ways to reduce TCO. Delivering trusted and complete data to users, so getting over some of those data quality issues and bridging silos and things like that. Or other, so this is, we're very interested to hear if it's your issue, a challenge is not on this list, and please let us know through the question system. Okay, let's get a look at the answers. And yeah, about 30% saying user adoption is a big issue. So that's interesting. So that's the big one. 23% saying data security. About a little over 20% saying balancing enterprise and self-service. Managing TCO, interesting. Only 2.6% say that that's the issue. So that's good. And then delivering trusted and complete data to users, 23%. So you can see what some of the big issues are. Okay, Linda, off to you.
Yeah, interesting. Thanks, Dave. Before I introduce Ethan, our next speaker, I just want to remind the audience that we welcome your questions. So I said this at the beginning. If you were a little late joining us, please type your questions in there on the console and send them over, and we'll answer as many of those as we can after our next presentation. So on that note, joining Dave today from Grape City, please welcome Ethan Connor. As Technical Account Manager specializing in Wine Enterprise, Ethan handles Wine Enterprise's technical demos, customer education and success, outreach, and support. He also contributes to Grape City's library of white papers, blogs, videos, and technical resources. Ethan has been involved with developing developing and expanding technical products for 4 years and counting. He enjoys working in the data visualization and business intelligence industry, offering solutions by visualizing data to understand underlying trends and stories. So Ethan, welcome.
Thanks, Linda. My name is Ethan Connor. I'm a technical account manager for Wine Enterprise by Grape City. So what I'm going to be talking about today a little bit is what Wine Enterprise is all about, as well as some of our experience with our customers. So how we see our Wine Enterprise customers implementing some of these strategies that Dave talked about. So we'll go ahead and get started. So Wine Enterprise is an OS-agnostic, web-based business intelligence solution. We do have built-in modules for reporting, dashboarding, data governance, data federation, and much, much more. So at the end of the day, it provides a centralized platform for both technical and non-technical users alike to create dashboards and reports, edit those from within the portal, view and export those documents, manage them in terms of permissions and all of that, as well as distributing those reports and dashboards on automated distribution schedules. So it does act in kind of a twofold manner. So one being it can act as a standalone business intelligence platform for your enterprise, or it can also have the embedded BI capabilities for your in-house business process applications, or embedded in like a SaaS application, for example. So we are a very flexible business intelligence solution. So we'll talk a little bit more about what makes it so flexible. But first, I want to talk about my customer experiences, seeing how our customers are actually implementing these strategies, what they do, and first off, making it easier to gain actionable insights. So Dave brought up a lot of good points on this. I just wanted to speak a little bit about what I see customers doing to make it easier for their end users to gain actionable insights. So first, a really key feature that Wine has are tooltips on data tables and visualizations, both in reports and dashboards. And the reason this is so important is that tooltips essentially eliminate any ambiguity with a data visualization piece. So you're not leaving it up to the end user to determine what is this data visualization or what is this data telling me. Rather, you want to build that into a tooltip so that when a user is hovering over it, you're telling them what the data point is telling them. What makes that data point significant, and is there any action that could be taken given the value? So if this KPI reaches a certain threshold, what is the action that should be taken? Or if it's below a certain percentage, what needs to be addressed in order to get that number where it should be and meet that certain threshold? Choosing the right visualizations is so important, and this is something that a lot of people stress when enabling self-service business intelligence. So Wine does offer 30 plus visualizations on the dashboard side, other visualizations on the reporting side, but choosing the right visualization is all about the end user, kind of making sure that they're telling the right data story with the visualization that they're choosing. So it's really up to the data to determine what visualization should be used. Obviously, if you're telling a data story with data over time, you don't want to use a pie chart. And you could use that same example across 1,000 different visualizations. But it's all about making sure that the end user is educated to know what visualization they should be choosing. Or if you don't have end users building their own dashboards at all, and it's all internal enterprise business intelligence where you do have technical users choosing the right visualization, it's just all about making sure that the takeaway from that data is sufficiently represented by the visualization. So if there is a trend in that data, if there is an insight to be gathered, you want to make sure that that visualization is actually displaying that. And finally, more end user involvement throughout the entire development cycle of these reports and these dashboards. So what I see a lot of times with our customers is their clients or end users will lay out requirements for them to build some internal dashboards or reports for that client. They build it and then they deliver it, and then a week later they come back and say, you know what, we actually missed half of the requirements that our client really didn't tell us about until after the project was complete. So we need to go back and redo a lot of the same work. Well, if you involve those end users throughout the development cycle from the beginning to make sure that the creator of that document, whether it's a report, whether it's a dashboard, is actually involved with the end user to understand what are the key numbers that should be represented, what are the KPIs, what is the action that these numbers will help guide, so that the developer of the dashboard or report, whether that's a business user or whether that's a technical user, they make sure they understand the object or the objective and the purpose of that dashboard or the report. So balancing self-service capabilities with the value of enterprise solutions was another strategy that Dave had talked about. So one way that Wine Enterprise does this is inherently it's a flexible business intelligence tool. And it's always important to make sure that whatever BI tool you're using in your organization has that similar flexibility. And when I say flexibility, what I mean is that it's powerful enough for technical users to create complex and highly advanced data visualizations, dashboards, and reports, but it's also intuitive enough and easy to learn for business users who aren't so technical, who don't want to be writing expressions or writing their own queries. So Wine is very flexible in that sense, in that it can be powerful when it needs to be powerful, but it's also very intuitive and easy for business users to learn and understand. A lot of times we see that some of our competitors are either so powerful and robust that it's too overwhelming for business users, or conversely, it's too simple and not advanced enough for technical users to do what they need to do. The second point about balancing self-service with enterprise solutions is our built-in multi-tenancy and data governance capabilities. So this basically allows any type of multi-tenant deployment and handling all your data governance needs. So technical users can handle and focus on those standardized and regulated reports and dashboards, and working on maybe the more complex documents. But business users at the same time can handle their one-time personalized ad hoc reports and dashboards, and edit and create those simple documents that don't require the technical authors of those. The key thing I want to talk about here is reducing TCO and adding flexibility through web-based and embedded capabilities. So a lot of our customers come over to Wine and they significantly reduce their total cost of ownership when it comes to a BI platform. And how they're able to do that is with Wine's server-based licensing. So we don't charge per user, we don't charge per data size or cap your data limits in any way. And ultimately, there's no real hidden costs other than the implementation resources like setting up a VM or the server, and then the license itself. So you're paying per production server, so you're not paying any per user fees, any data fees, any licenses for dev and QA and any of that. So it's all a very inclusive licensing model. And then through web-based and embedded capabilities, we do have API capabilities as well as iframe support, built-in support for multi-tenancy. It's very easy to provision servers to scale up or down as needed to kind of grow with your user base, but you won't be paying more. And then you can deploy on Linux, Windows, or Docker. So highly flexible and a very great solution for kind of lowering, but ultimately maintaining that low total cost of ownership when it comes to business intelligence. So why Wine Enterprise? Well, like I said, no per user fees or data size limits, and that's one of our key differentiators. So you're lowering and maintaining that lower total cost of ownership, but you're not sacrificing any of the key functionality that you need in a robust business intelligence tool. You're getting a business user-friendly report designer and a dashboard designer built into a centralized platform for both technical and non-technical audiences. We include automated distribution schedules so users can email out or distribute their reports and dashboards in other ways, at their own convenience. So it is a fully self-service portal for all of their business intelligence requirements. You can integrate Wine with virtually any type of security provider, whether that's Active Directory, LDAP, or something completely custom that you build in-house. That does include built-in multi-tenancy support. The scalable architecture, so it's very easy to kind of scale up as needed, deploying on Windows, Linux, and Docker. We do have built-in audit logging for compliance across all industries, especially important for those in the healthcare and finance realms. And then finally, very easy to integrate with your existing business process applications through iframe, through API, and of course, you can white label Wine as much as you would like. Now, I would love to give an in-depth demo right now, but for now, I just have some screenshots to show, kind of just a brief look at Wine, and then we'll hand it back off to Linda. But what we're looking at here is a centralized portal for users to create documents, so dashboards and reports, view those, export them, and distribute them. So on the left here, your documents are categorized. In the middle, it's showing those documents. And on the right-hand side, which isn't showing right now, but that'll be a panel to kind of handle revisions of those documents and distribution of those documents and much more. What we're looking at here is our data set designer. So this has built-in capabilities for data modeling, data governance, and multi-tenancy. So our data set designer provides a very intuitive UI for basically crafting those data sets, regardless of how complex the joins may become. So users are able to build out their data sets really within Wine to kind of handle maybe data that's coming from multiple places. We're looking at our intuitive dashboard designer here, where our visualizations are on the left-hand side, our design surface is in the middle, our data and the buckets where you would drop that data are on the right-hand side, along with our properties. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a powerful dashboard designer. It's meant to be powerful enough for technical users to create the complex and powerful dashboards that they may need, but it's also very easy for business users to go in and edit those or create simpler dashboards depending on what they need to do with that. And then finally, our report designer is built in a similar manner. It's intentionally created to be flexible between technical and non-technical audiences, and how we handle that is two different properties modes, one being basic, one being advanced, where the basic mode is built for business users, the advanced mode is built for technical users. We also have semantic modeling for a business user representation of your relational data. Now, when it comes to data, we do offer quite an extensive bit of data connectivity options, including basically any relational database like Oracle SQL Server, MySQL, SQLite, or Postgres, file-based data like Excel, JSON, CSV, or XML, as well as some other data sources like MongoDB, OData. And if you are using data that doesn't fall into this list here, whatever that data provider may be, something like Snowflake, for example, if it has an ODBC connector, then we can use it. So we can connect with that ODBC driver. So to wrap things up, Wine Enterprise, please reach out, share your feedback, get in touch with us. We'd love to talk to you about Wine, set up a personalized demo, talk to you about how you can kind of implement Wine or migrate over from your existing BI solution, or if you don't have one set up, how you can implement Wine in your own environment, very easily. So our email to get in touch is wine.experts@grapecity.com. That's wine.experts@grapecity.com. Our website is wine.grapecity.com. And thank you, and I'll hand it back off to Linda, and we'll wrap things up with the Q&A.
All right, thanks very much, Ethan. I'm going to go ahead and leave that screen up on the console for folks so they can jot down some of those links if they want them before we put up the Q&A slide. But yeah, let's go ahead and move into answering some of these audience questions. Dave, I want to start with one for you regarding the balance between self-service and enterprise BI and reporting. Our organization wants to deploy self-service to reduce IT costs. Is this a good idea, or should we still get IT involved?
Well, I think I would say to get that balance between self-service and enterprise, IT needs to continue to be involved. It's important for the organization to ensure that quality data, that's secure, trusted data that adheres to governance issues and governance rules and policies are getting to users. So I think IT still has a very important role in that. And IT also can help reduce redundancy. I think I tried to make that point using reuse, pre-definition to get ahead of what users are doing so that they're not trying to reinvent everything every single time. And also helping them compose things like queries better, so that it doesn't tax systems unnecessarily. IT has a big role to play in terms of advancing skills to make sure that those skills are matching, skill development is matching what users really need. And then also from the enterprise perspective, using things like metadata, the data catalogs and so forth, can improve collaboration and make it easier for users to find and access data. So I would say get IT out of the things that maybe they used to do that it's not necessary for IT to do, but don't take IT out of the picture in terms of these things that IT really still needs to be involved in.
Yeah, interesting. All right, thank you. Let's see. Let me go over to Ethan, our speaker from Grape City. Ethan, how about this one? What sort of training or tools should we be providing to end users in order to encourage them to use BI themselves? Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it really is kind of varying across the board to, and it's highly dependent on how much experience the end user base has with business intelligence, to be honest. A lot of the training or tools that we often work with our customers on is providing workshops or trainings for their end users, or even just for their trainers. So kind of training the trainers, so to say. Of course, documentation for any tool that you use is always going to be useful, especially ones that aren't focused more on the administrative side, but more on the design side. So how to actually use your designers from a business user perspective is always extremely helpful. Courses through, vendors, including TDWI. I know when we are sponsoring some of the events TDWI puts together, we always attend courses on data visualization and building effective dashboards. And I always find that those are extremely helpful, even for myself building out our sample dashboards and things like that. So I have to imagine it's just as useful for anyone who's building out dashboards or business intelligence reports to attend things like that and really just to always be learning.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And following up on that, Dave had that great slide of those cluttered dashboards. We've all seen those. A question here is, why is it so difficult to design navigation and a good look and feel for a dashboard?
Yeah, that's another good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say there's a lot of factors to that. A lot of it is kind of psychological. A lot of it is human nature. Of course, I might consume data visualizations in a different way or have a different preference to how that data is shared than you or Dave or anyone else really. So it's a tough question to answer. I don't think anyone can really answer that exactly as to why it's so difficult to design that. But there are a lot of templates out there, and there are a lot of guidelines as to how the human eye kind of registers data visualization. I know a lot of people say that the top left-hand corner is the most important thing that you should be using. That's where the human eye goes to first naturally, and then it kind of progresses to the right and then below that. So there's a lot of different factors. For kind of tackling that problem or obstacle, I'd say you could always create different versions of the same dashboard, using the same data visualization, using the same themes, but maybe experimenting with the layout and things like that to see how different users react to that dashboard and see if one version is more effective than another.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Ethan. And I think your emphasis on training is exactly right. Dave, over to you with this question, maybe for both speakers, but first to you, Dave. None of this can be done with proper BI-oriented data warehouse investments and data preparation, correct? We had several questions where people asked about the importance of data prep behind all of this.
Well, yes, I think that's absolutely true. Is that data preparation? It's there. I mean, you can't really use the data without preparing it in most cases. I mean, if you have data scientists looking at raw data and they're looking at things like that for things in the data that is specific to that. But for most users, there has to be some sort of preparation cycle. And I think the main thing is, again, that's sort of getting away from the one-size-fits-all, because not everything is necessary for all users. And then I think you can also, this is where training is important to make sure that the users understand, for example, the level of quality. Say if it's a real-time data feed, that they need to understand that there could be errors in that data. It may not be perfect data versus other kinds of data that would be. But getting back to your question, I think, data warehousing, I think, is had something of a revival in the last few years after organizations, looking at data lakes and maybe looking at a way to set up data, particularly in the cloud and data storage, cloud storage, and getting away from the necessity of a data warehouse. And again, for certain use cases, that's a good way to go. It's not necessary to set up a data warehouse, but for other kinds of use cases, particularly probably more traditional BI and reporting and performance management and those kind of things, you do need some sort of preparation cycle that may lead to an actual data warehouse. That would be my answer.
Yeah, thank you. Ethan, I'm going to go back to you with this question, which came in during the registration process. So I wanted to get this one answered. What should we look for in software vendors in terms of implementing the 6 strategies recommended in this webinar? What are some of the things you need to look for in a vendor for those implementing those strategies, Ethan?
Yeah, that's a great question. And admittedly, I'll be a little bit biased and say that, Wine Enterprise does handle all six of these strategies that Dave had mentioned and presented on. And I think that's part of the reason why we were so excited to sponsor this one. But, when you're looking at a vendor, regardless of if it's wine or not, these six strategies are so important across the board. So, using visualization to make it easier for users to gain actionable insights. Well, you want to make sure that the tool you're looking at actually has, a robust collection of data visualization tools so that, you're not missing any key visualizer that you would need to tell that kind of data story. And the self-service aspect of balancing that with the value of enterprise solutions, same thing. It's really important to make sure that business users not only have the option to go in and do their own reporting and dashboarding, but they're encouraged to do it and they want to do it and they find it easy to do it. So something with a not a steep learning curve is something you want to look for. If it's very hard to use, then your business users will have the same experience. So you want to ensure that the tool you're looking at is always kind of easy to use and does balance those self-service capabilities with the power and value of an enterprise solution. And then of course the final piece I would say is the TCO, the total cost of ownership. Anything you can do to lower that and to maintain it is always going to be critical to the bottom line of an organization. So I'd say look out for those pieces especially, but all six of those, you should always keep those in mind when looking at a vendor. And there's other factors too, but Wine Enterprise does hit these. So I think we do a good job of hitting these six strategies.
Yeah, Connor, how about this question, which sort of follows up on that one? How do you decide what visualization to use? Somebody is asking, is there a certain framework to follow? Does it come down to personal preference?
Yeah, that's a good question. Lots of frameworks, lots of guidelines. I'd say it really is dependent on what data you're using and what that kind of takeaway from the data visualization you're looking for. If you're telling a story about data over time, you wouldn't want to use a pie chart. If you're using that kind of data, you'd want to use a line or an area chart. If you're working with compositional data, you'd want to use maybe a pie, maybe a bar, maybe a tree. Lots of different aspects. I think the personal preference does come into play with that a little bit, but ultimately I'd say there's plenty of resources out there to kind of guide what visualization you should use depending on the data you're using.
I think what I would add to that is to observe what users are doing and also share best practices in organizations. And getting back to kind of enterprise kind of role, that they can be helpful in that, or at least sort of organizations often set up things like over lunch they can begin to chat and sort of look at examples of visualizations that have worked. So that's a lot of it is kind of getting to some of the wisdom out there about what's working, what's not working, and getting that shared around users.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Thank you to both of our speakers. We are out of time here. I ran over a little to get some of these great questions answered. That was Dave Stoddard with TDWI. Joining Dave today, Ethan Connor with Wine Enterprise by Grape City. Thank you again also to Grape City for sponsoring today's presentation. I want to remind everybody that we did record it. We'll be sending you a link to the archive via email later today. Please feel free to pass that link on to colleagues. Also, don't forget the TDWI checklist report that goes with this webinar. That's by Dave Stoddard, sponsored by Wine Enterprise, and it goes into a lot more depth than we had time to cover today. I encourage you to download that at the TDWI website. It's there free of charge. Finally, a quick reminder to everyone that TDWI offers a wealth of information, including the latest research, reports, webinars, and information on business intelligence, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. I encourage you to tap into all of that expertise at tdwi.org. And on that note, from all of us here today, thank you very much for attending. This concludes today's event.